will be available on the website and on our YouTube channel afterwards. So thank you very much. And here is Jonny Sedgwick. Over to you.
So I'd just like to talk for a few minutes really about our trip to Mallorca last September. Why should we talk about that? I suppose I was hoping it might be of interest to some, and perhaps some who've already been to Mallorca to reminisce, perhaps some who might be considering it as a charter destination. And also I thought it'd be interesting to share our experience. I'm not sure other members maybe cruise their own boats predominantly, just share some of our experiences of chartering abroad, which might be of interest to some as well. And we also chartered with a couple of small children, so and that might be interesting, and also just a nice thing to do for me in the winter to whilst not on the water as much as I'd like, to pull together a few slides and think back over a few stories. So let's begin. So yeah, you might remember I gave a short talk last year of our adventures in West Cork, much closer to home, where we spent the week. We rented a boat from Sovereign Sailing, who I'm sure most of you know, in Kinsale, and we headed west as far as Baltimore and Schull and Cape Clear, and then back to Kinsale over the course of a week. And we had a really kind of fabulous, I suppose, fairly adventurous week. This is us in South Harbour in Cape Clear, eating fresh mackerel, which one of the crew caught on a campfire, and we had some beautiful photos and things like that. But quite an adventurous week. So there's been some big changes in our family since then. When we were in Kinsale, Aoife was my fiance. She subsequently signed on the dotted line, and little Jack was born a little over a year ago, last January. So we kind of thought perhaps cruising in West Cork would be a little bit too adventurous for us in 2022. So we thought about, okay, how might we work on that? So we decided to go to Mallorca, and we chartered this boat. It was quite a big boat, I suppose, a Sun Odyssey 419. So I think it was 41 or 42 feet, pretty large, pretty beamy, pretty spacious, with two heads and things like that. And here's the crew. So there were two families. There's myself, Aoife and Jack, and then one of my good college friends, his wife, and their little boy, Finn. So we had two little boys. Jack was 8 months old at the time, and I think Finn was 13 or 14 months old. So two small little lads. We chartered off this crowd based out of Palma in Mallorca, called Cruesa Mallorca Yacht Charter. The boat was fairly new. I think it was 2019, but with COVID, it had a very kind of light couple of seasons in 2020 and 2021. So it felt fairly brand new. And perhaps it's crude to talk about the price, but I thought it'd be useful for people, if anyone was considering chartering abroad. I think we paid about 2,700 euros all in for the boat, including the outboard, the cleaning, the base fees, and all the rest of it. So, very expensive if you were one family, but when one splitting it two ways, and it certainly was a big boat, you could easily have had, six adults on there if you'd wanted, or even 7 or 8. Doesn't work out too expensive. So why did we pick Mallorca? Well, there are a few reasons. The first one was we were thinking, well, with these two characters, we perhaps didn't want to be doing particularly long flights. So we kind of thought, perhaps Greece, Turkey, a little bit further away on the edge of Europe. We're thinking, where could we go that would be, the kind of shortest possible flights? We also, the other family, we were flying from Dublin, and the other guys were flying from London. So we wanted somewhere that was relatively easy to get to from both places. And the other thing we really fancied, we thought would help us this year, we didn't want a kind of 2-hour transfer in a small taxi or a bus from the airport to the base. And Mallorca seemed pretty handy in the end. It was only about 15 minutes transfer from the airport to the marinas in Palma, where we rented the boat. And the other thing we wanted to go somewhere new. And we, in particular, we've chartered in Croatia quite a few times over the last, a decade or so. So it was nice. We wanted to go somewhere new and explore a little bit. So that was kind of why we picked Mallorca out. I think the runner-up place that we were tempted to go to, which we'll go to, I suppose, at some stage, was Sardinia. So preparation, I'm sure you guys are the same. Whenever I go on holidays, I always ask for a pilot book of where we're going for a birthday or Christmas previously, and kind of enjoy in the run up to the holiday, doing a little bit of planning and thinking about where the nicest places are and things, and where we might go. I'm not sure if anyone's gone to them, but Eddie at Sail Cork, I think it's normally in the spring, he runs a few sessions, normally on the West Cork coast, kind of little piloted sessions where he explains some of his kind of local knowledge and tips and tricks for the particular area. And he did one on Mallorca last year, so I went to that and kind of jotted down some notes of places that he thought were particularly good or not, and kind of tips and things he'd learned from chartering there. And then, of course, also having a look on the Navionics chart viewer and Google Maps and Google Earth and things like that, just to kind of start to get my bearings of the place and think about where it might be nice to go while we were down there. The real preparation then, so we did a little bit of sailing over the summer, I suppose, just to get Jack's sea legs for the first time and build Aoife's kind of confidence that this wasn't a terrible idea, going sailing for a week. So you can see this was Jack just a few weeks after he was born, doing some, and you guys will obviously recognize the port in the background. So it wasn't pilotage planning for Mallorca in this case, but nevertheless he was with me from a young age when doing some kind of passage planning and this kind of thing. I'm lucky enough in the last year or so I have a share in this small little boat called the Ballerina de Viento, which is a little feeling 720, and we keep her in Malahide. So we were able to, on fair weather days over the summer, you can see we were able to take Jack out for the afternoon. We didn't make it very far this year, just pottering to Lambay and Howth was, I think, the furthest we took her. But, it was nice. It was certainly good preparation anyway for the sailing holiday. The other, Aoife will probably agree with me, very important preparation we did. I found over the years that if I don't do much sailing and I go on a sailing holiday with a mixed crew of kind of sailors and non-sailors, I have this kind of highly kind of pent up sailing energy. I just want to go get up at first thing in the morning, go sailing all day and sailing through the night and all this adventure. And sometimes I've found that, if the crew are a little bit, less interested in sailing and they want to, go to the restaurant and have a lie in and explore the town for a few hours and perhaps just go sailing for a couple of hours, I'm like, let's get moving. So I found having a kind of prefix of sailing really, really helps me to then be on the same wavelength as the others when we're on holidays. So this was me. Simon mentioned I do a little bit of freelance instructing. So this was me doing some instructing in Cork over the summer. I know a few of you have sailed her, but Brian Baru, who's based in Dunleary, this was I ran a trip for them for 5 days with a group of young people in West Cork. And then this is Aoife and I can't remember actually if we were in Howth or Malahide there. But we did a little bit of sailing over the summer. So I think this was a really important part of my preparation, was getting some of that kind of pent up sailing energy out of the system so that I was on a similar wavelength to the others, and not looking for a different things out of the trip. Okay, so let's have a little bit of a more detailed look at Mallorca. So you can see it's one of the Balearic Islands off the coast of Spain. And if we zoom in a little bit, you can see there are actually 3 of these Balearic Islands. For anyone who hasn't been there before, there's Menorca, Mallorca, and Ibiza, and they're quite close together. So if you were there, with a well-found boat and a crew that was up for it, it's only around 50 miles between Mallorca and Ibiza, and around 30 from Mallorca to Menorca. So very possible to sail between them. And we did bump into some people who, were making those kind of passages as part of their holidays. It's a fairly big island. It's around, the shortest possible route around it is about 160 miles. So it is possible to circumnavigate the island. It'd probably be a little bit long, perhaps for a week. If you had some good sailors on board, would be more than manageable in a week. Certainly manageable if you had 10 days or 2 weeks. So I believe quite a few people do that. On this kind of northwest coast of the island is really mountainous. It's meant to be beautiful, and there aren't many kind of safe havens up this coast. So I think Soler is one of the only ones really that you can stop at on that northwest coast. So there are a couple of longer passages you need to do to circumnavigate. But as you can probably imagine, we didn't circumnavigate. we flew into Palma, and we actually stayed in this red box in the kind of southwest of the island. So it wasn't our most adventurous trip to date. We kind of thought, let's just cut the distance and stay in a smaller area, and take the pace a little bit slower, just to make sure that that it wasn't too intense for the two mums and the little boys, and just have a fairly relaxed holiday. We were kind of caravanning on the sea, I suppose, as opposed to a more regular sailing trip. So let's have a little bit more detail then of where we went. So this is a kind of zoom in of that area in the southwest of the island. Here's Palma. You can see the airport here, really close, 15 minutes from the city. And there's a stack of different marinas in Palma. It's a huge kind of urban centre, I suppose. And then this is that southwest part of the island, all the way down to this big island, this little island here called Dragonera, at the sort of western tip. So if we talk through where we went, so we spent our first night in Palma, in the base. We slept on board, but we didn't leave the boat. We didn't leave the marina there on the Saturday. And then on the Sunday, we came around around a couple of the headlands. We dropped our anchor for an hour or two in the afternoon, and then we pulled in and slept on the anchor in this place called Santa Ponsa. We then, on the next day, we again dropped our anchor over lunch in this place called Cala Camp de Mar, and then we spent the night in this beautiful town called Andratx. I'll give you a kind of overview of the route here, and then we'll talk through some of these places in a little bit more detail with a few more photos. This is just to kind of give you an overview of where we went. On the next day, then we headed up towards the corner, in the nook of this little island Dragonera, to this place called San Telmo, which was beautiful. We slept on a mooring there, and then the next day we put in a kind of longer day. We came back to this beautiful cala. Cala means cove, I think, in Spanish. This beautiful cala called Portals Vels here, and then we anchored in this little anchorage called Las Aletas for the night. And the next day, then we went across to this place called Arenal, where we went to the yacht club. And then the next day we went back to Las Aletas for lunch, and then dropped the boat back into Palma and slept on the boat then Saturday night before our flight back. So we didn't kind of cover a huge distance. I put in a few things on costs. So it was quite interesting. So you heard me mention there, we spent the first and the last night we spent in Palma. We were in the base where we picked up the boat, and there was no extra charge for staying there. We spent a couple of nights on anchor in Santa Ponsa and Las Aletas. Of course, that was free. The night we did in San Telmo was pretty cheap. It was 53 euros for the mooring, but the other two nights were very expensive, at least by my standards. So we paid 120 for one night and 105 for the other, and those were both in yacht clubs. So there's a yacht club in Andratx. I can't remember the name of it, Club de Vela, Porto de Andratx, and then Yacht Club de Arenal or whatever. And I'll talk about those a little bit more in detail. So they were pretty expensive, but we did think they were a good part of the trip, and I'll explain why. Okay, so let's kind of talk through each of those places we went to in more detail. So Palma, Palma was actually quite nice. We walked into the old town for a drink, and we put the little lads to bed, and then I think Matt and I walked off and got some takeaway pizzas. And the supermarket trolleys, and the supermarkets were quite good. They let us give them 20 euros deposit and take the trolley all the way down the hill to avoid carrying bags. So yeah, we kind of victualled the boat, had a pizza, an early night, and a couple of drinks, and just kind of enjoyed starting the holiday really. And as I said, they let us stay there for free, which was handy. The second night then, Santa Ponsa, we actually didn't go ashore in Santa Ponsa. We ended up eating on board. It was interesting. We sailed past a couple of marinas. I think Adriano was one of them. I think there's another one called Portals. And I kind of called them up on the afternoon and said, hey, we're a few miles away. Would you have a space for us? And they said, no, maybe like towards the end of the week. So I was quite surprised, I suppose, on the first day. I was like, wow, I never sailed anywhere before where it was so difficult to get in. And Adriano, the marina there, wanted 200 euros all found for the boat for the night, which also gave me a bit of a shock. So it certainly felt busy, which we were surprised by, considering we were there in the last week of September. So we slept on the anchor in Santa Ponsa, and I kind of spent an hour or two kind of sharpening up my plan and making a couple of bookings. Normally, I'd be kind of very averse to sort of sailing to a schedule. So, kind of like to not really have any bookings and just kind of, work one day at a time really with the weather. But Palma, the kind of the nature of the bookings we found there kind of forced us really to, I suppose, book something, 1 or 2 nights ahead. So we had a few things penciled in. Andratx then, I think Andratx was the second, I put it on the top of the second favorite place we visited. So we stayed, there's a concession, I think they operate the what were probably formerly the kind of state-owned moorings and marinas called Portside B. So there's a big Portside B facility down here where there are some a bit of quay that can be tied up to, and then there's a big yacht club, this Club de Vela Porto de Andratx up here, and they also have some moorings. So we stayed in there. It was great. It was expensive. It was 120 euros, but the thing that we thought was really nice, it included the pool. So we kind of got in there for lunchtime, and we didn't leave until lunchtime the next day. So we kind of spent nearly 24 hours and had a swim in the pool with the lads, and we walked around into the town, beautiful town, kind of set in the foot of a valley, and had a really nice dinner and things like that. So we enjoyed a bit more. It was a much shorter day sailing, but we really enjoyed our time ashore there. And made the most of the kind of shoreside facilities that the yacht club had to offer, particularly for the 2 young ones. The next thing we did then, we came around the corner a little further to this place called San Telmo. So it's a beautiful little kind of cove. This is the mainland here, well, the mainland of Palma, and this is that little island, Dragonera, and we're kind of tucked into the nook of it. This is taken from a restaurant, but you can see these are a number of moorings which are operated by Portside B, the kind of state concession. So we had a lovely night there, and it was pretty cheap, 53 euros. So we really enjoyed that. One thing we found which was really interesting, we showed up there around 3 p.m. and all of the moorings were full. We were like, bloody hell. We ended up with one which was a little bit further out than we'd have liked. It was down here somewhere. And we kind of wanted to be tucked in a little bit more in the shelter and closer to the beach. And we actually found, particularly close to Palma and Andratx, the bigger ports, there were loads of day trippers, and they were all emptying off those moorings and clearing the anchorages at sort of 5-6 o'clock. So we moved ourselves into a kind of much better position in the early evening. We found that in a couple of places, so it's definitely one of my kind of top tips. But San Telmo was beautiful. That was our favourite place. We had a lovely dinner there in a restaurant looking over the bay, and then went back on board. There's just another couple of little pictures of San Telmo. So you can see here's Dragonera, and the mooring field is kind of in here, tucked even in between this even smaller island and the kind of beach in here. You can't see them on this picture, but the mooring field is kind of in here. There's, I don't know, probably 15 or 20 moorings. So it's a beautiful little place, our favourite place. The next day then we sailed quite a long day, I suppose, all the way back around a few of those headlands and into this little anchorage called Las Aletas. I think these are a kind of almost like skerries. They're a kind of series of islands, one of which has a kind of is connected to the mainland. A beautiful little anchorage. And we kind of took a gamble after what we'd seen the previous day, but there's a busy anchorage here. But we showed up at 6 o'clock, and we found that the boats with the kind of prime time spaces right at the front of the anchorage in the nicest place, they were leaving to go back to Palma. So we said thanks very much and took the kind of best place in the anchorage, I suppose, for overnight. And then we cooked and ate on board. That's so you can see all of the other boats further out to seaward of us. So we were delighted with that. The next day we went to another yacht club. So in this place called Arenal, Club Nautico Arenal. The yacht club was great. Again, brilliant facilities, the swimming pool and things like that were quite handy. The one thing I would say, it's not very nice outside the yacht club. And we went for a walk kind of down the strip. It felt like being, it was kind of tattoo shops and different. It wasn't really our kind of type of place. So but it was the yacht club itself was beautiful. And it's here, you can see where it is here. It's just opposite Palma in the Bay of Palma. It's about 7 miles maybe back to Palma. So we were kind of happy with that. We were like, oh yeah, that's handy. So we've just a short day then to do on the Saturday to drop the boat back. This was something we learned then. So the Portside B, the company I mentioned, who kind of operate the state concession for the a number of marinas and sets of moorings. We learned a few things about them. So that the first one was they have two separate systems: Portside B, which have a number of marinas, and then Portside B Boyas, which operate the mooring buoys. And you wouldn't really believe it, but it's two separate systems, and you need to register twice, even though it looks identical. The other thing was that Portside B, the only way to book these marinas is through their online system. You can't call them, you can't do it any other way. And to book in the online system, you have to have your boat registered, and you have to register the boat, and it has to be validated by a person. And to do that, you have to have uploaded some details of the boat, its length, its beam, its draft, but also you have to have uploaded this Spanish certificate of registration. They won't register the boat unless you've done that. So it was one of the things we did. And the other thing I found was that the mobile version of these apps wouldn't let me register. So I'd registered for Portside B, the marinas one, on the PC before I left. We asked the charter company to send us the details that we needed, and I definitely recommend doing that if you were going. I hadn't registered for the Boyas one, so I ended up struggling with that a little bit. But yeah, if I was going back, I would definitely recommend requesting the details from the charter company of the boat and getting registered in both of these systems before we went, preferably on the PC, where these things seem to work a little bit better. But where they did have a Portside B marina or Portside B moorings, they seemed pretty good, and they were much cheaper than the kind of private ones. For example, in Andratx, there were we were in the yacht club. There were some Portside B facilities, but we weren't able to book them. We were too late. So that's kind of something good to know if you were thinking of going. The thing which is interesting, they have this protected seaweed called Posidonia, that grows in a number of places, and yeah, they're obviously dragging anchors and chains and ground tackle through it causes a lot of damage to it. So there are some kind of patrols which come round some of the anchorages and check whether you're anchored on weed or sand, and they may ask you to move. And they actually publish this app called Donia, which you can download, and it will actually kind of show you where the patches of sand and weed are, so you can try your best to avoid them. Which is quite handy. We did meet the patrol a couple of times. I think one time we're okay, one time they asked us to move, and they recommended we got this app. So quite handy to know. Yeah, they're really trying to protect the biodiversity that grows in this particular native weed they have there as much as they can. So yeah, we once we got onto that, we certainly tried as well to minimise any anchoring on that. What did we take with us was interesting. Mostly from the perspective of the two little ones, because we obviously just took regular stuff for us. If anyone, I'm sure you guys have had chartered with children before, but we were kind of our first time to it, really chartering abroad. So we had life jackets for both of the little lads. Of course, I'm not sure we would have fared very well trying to get the charter company to supply us with something that was the right size. So we took a life jacket for both of them, which we used when they're in the tender and things like that. Aoife swore by this Milton cold water sterilizer. At home you might be using a microwave or a kind of special kind of sterilizer machine, while Jack was still on, needed sterilized bottles. This thing, we just filled it up each night, put a chlorine tab in, and then in the morning everything was sterile. So that was really handy. Aoife took all of Jack's milk with us. The reason was one of her friends had been to Spain previously and said that they couldn't find the brand they used in the shop, so he was worried that maybe he wouldn't take well to changing brand. So we decided just to take with us a supply of the particular brand that he was on at the time. One of the best things we took this little fold-up high chair for Jack, so that he could we could pop that up downstairs or even up on deck, and give him a mobile dining room, which was really handy. And we each had a very kind of compact little travel buggy, these little strollers, and we had two of them, and they both would fit in the lazarette together, which was super handy, as opposed to having a kind of great big buggy. We did take dinners for Jack as well, in these little pouches. That was just to take the stress or the pressure off having to find certain foods and having to kind of cook. So we had dinners for him if we needed them in these pouches, so that was just handy. And we also took some of these baby swimming inflatables so that we could have fun in the sea. And Aoife, I think, quite cleverly booked our airport transfer, and she pre-booked those and booked them with two child seats, just so that when we arrived there, it was particularly convenient that someone was meeting us and had the child seat sorted, so that we were whizzing into the city with them in the child seats, as opposed to kind of trying to make those kind of arrangements when we landed in the country. A few kind of top tips from my perspective then, things that we did or that we learned that I would definitely pass on or even note down for myself if I was going back. I definitely would be hesitant to go to Mallorca in peak season. We weren't there in peak season, but I was surprised how busy it was when we were there at the back end of September, and it was difficult to get bookings in a few places. So my suspicion is that if it's significantly busier in peak season, it would have been tough. Chill down the sailing. So we hired a charter boat with, roller furling, mainsail. Normally it wouldn't be my preference. I kind of prefer the kind of sailing performance of, something with a bit of roach and battens and things. But, I was just like, no, let's just get whatever's easiest. This particular holiday for us wasn't necessarily so much about the sailing. My main objective was being allowed to go back again. Chill the distance down. So I really kind of, the distance we covered on this sailing holiday, I think, was less than half of what we've the least we've ever done on a previous kind of week's charter. But that was, a deliberate decision just to make sure that it was manageable for everyone. Plenty of shore leave. Shore days on my sailing trips before have kind of, I guess, been more or less mythical. But we did have at least 2 days where we spent, nearly a full kind of 24-hour period ashore in the 2 yacht clubs and visiting the pool and things like that. So that really helped make it manageable for the 2 mums and the two young ones. I think taking this is mainly led by Aoife, but making sure we had some of those bits of kit for the young ones was really helpful. Having kind of thought in advance about the type of things that would be really handy to have on the boat, and making sure we had them with us definitely made it easier. This tip about the day trippers leaving the anchorages, particularly close to the big ports of Palma and Andratx, was a real revelation. So once we'd kind of clocked that was a thing, it was really handy to know, and enabled us to anchor in a couple of nice places as a result. One of the things that's a little bit of an irritation about chartering a boat is that you have to have it back by a certain time on the Saturday, and you have to fill the diesel tank up. So there's a huge queue often for the diesel pontoon on the Saturday afternoon, and it's not really a fun thing to have to do on your holiday. So we had the idea to actually it's on Friday we were dropping the boat back, not Saturday. We had the idea to actually nip back to Palma in the morning, fill the diesel tank, and then go out to anchor for the afternoon and have a kind of lazy afternoon, and then go back in with with having hardly used half a litre out of the tank. So that was quite nice to avoid having to kind of queue and mess about with a bit of pressure in the afternoon on Friday. We just had to go straight back to our berth. Just wrote San Telmo, where we spent the night on a mooring, and Andratx in the yacht club, and they were our 2 favourite places. The yacht clubs were expensive, but the pool and the facilities and things they had, the restaurants were great. We found, it's probably not too surprising, but the further we got from, I know we didn't get very far, but the further we got from Palma, the better it got, we found, which makes sense, I suppose. The Donia app was a useful thing to have, to try and avoid anchoring on the weed. I definitely found it more admin heavy, if I can say that, than Croatia or Greece. So a number of the marinas, when they wanted to take a booking, they wanted the boat's details, they wanted an insurance document, the ship's registration certificate. I haven't really had that in advance in before. In Croatia, I've just kind of like show up on the tie up, and then they'll come and take a handful of documents off you and take them to the office. But they seem to want a bit more in advance, which I wasn't really expecting. So as a result, I think it's definitely a good tip to get the boat's details and documents before you go, and register for both of those 2 Ports IB systems. I would say because of the marinas, it's also probably a good idea to have an email with attachments kind of pre-made up with the boat's details, the boat's documents, the crew passports and things, so that when a marina says, hey, send us all your documents, you can just forward it on to them and save a little bit of kind of administrative hassle when on holidays. Always be willing to anchor is probably, I guess, a good recommendation for any charter holiday or any sailing holiday. We found on the first day we were a little bit caught out in that I'd expected to be going to one of these marinas I'd read about, and both of them said no, and one of them said you can come tomorrow if you want, but it's 200 quid. So I think having plenty of victuals on the boat and being willing to anchor and having stuff on board to be able to cook and eat on board and drink and still have a good holiday, you know, enabled us to not be too worried about that. You know, if we can't get in somewhere, we'll find somewhere nice to anchor off, and we'll be fine. So that was good preparation. I definitely found that the trade-off a little bit difficult. I mentioned earlier, kind of sailing to a schedule is in general not something I would look to do, but you know, I felt a little bit forced to book some places at least kind of 1 to 2, 3 nights ahead, because it wasn't possible to book them, you know, today or tomorrow. So there was a bit of a trade-off needed there. I definitely needed to think further ahead than I have done previously. Yeah, particularly Palma, there's a lot of charter boats in Palma. So particularly on the kind of Saturday when you first land and pick the boat up, or the Sunday, there's, you know, obviously the boats are kind of converging back on Palma on the changeover days around the weekend. So particularly kind of important probably to think about yeah, where you're going to go, or booking somewhere maybe the night before you fly. And mix up the longer and shorter days was something we found worked really well. This is just a bit of a table with the distances we did. So the Saturday we stayed in Palma, we picked the boat up. Then on the Sunday we did that longer day around to Santa Ponsa. Then we did a really short day. We were ashore by lunchtime in the yacht club and had kind of nearly a full 24 hours ashore. And we did another little short hop up to Andratx, and we were on the mooring, I think, by around 3 o'clock. Then the next day we did a bit of a longer day, and then another kind of you know, nearly 24 hours in the yacht club, and then a couple of short days. So we did two reasonably long days, and then three or four you know, pretty modest hops, and that worked well for us. So you can see you know, 72 miles over the course of a week's charter. We took it very steady, you know, but we stayed in that kind of condensed area around Palma. But you know, it worked really well for us on this occasion with what we were looking to get out of the trip. And you know, I think everyone is happy to go back. A few final photos then, and then I'll shut up and we can have some questions. This is a nice photo of Jack getting his bath in the sink on the yacht, which was fun. This is Jack and Finn. I think they were captivated by some cartoons or something we were showing them. And there's a nice photo of the two boys, one of them grabbing the nose of the other. And then, yeah, that's it. This isn't Mallorca. This is one of my favorite photos of the trip we were on last year in West Cork. I think it's in Horseshoe Harbour on Sherkin. Yeah, that's one of my favourite pictures. So yeah, thanks very much for listening. Keep a lookout for us. If you see this little ballerina de viento, the Feeling 720, you know who we are. And yeah, I also have mentioned at the start, I do a little bit of freelance skippering, freelance instructing, and I kind of keep a blog on Instagram, shipshape.sailing. So, you know, feel free to give me a follow, or, you know, my contact details are there. If anyone, if you've any questions you want to ask me about this or anything else, you can get in touch. Yeah, I'm open to any questions or a discussion.